Good morning or good afternoon. Today we'll be watching a Quizzette video on Quizzette 705. Please make sure that you write your last name, comma, your first name, today's date, and your class color, which I'll just write that on blue. Number 1 on Monday is always going to give you a scenario where you have to figure out if, actually, they're not all the same thing. I just remembered. So number 1 on Monday is different from all the others, and that's why I put it on Monday number 1 so that I could give you the answer. But Tuesday number 1 is a lot different. Just read the question carefully. It's a word problem, and you'll be able to hopefully answer it with an integer, which is a positive or negative number. So number 1 says the low temperature for 5 days was -5, -7, -2, +2, and -3. What was the average low temperature for those days? So average is also considered the word mean. Not like Miss Panamanian, you're being so mean today, but mean in math means average. And what you do is you add all the numbers together and you divide by the amount of numbers that you have. So you would get -5 plus -7 plus -2 plus 2 plus -3. So add all those together. This is -12 plus -2 is going to be -14 plus 2, that's going to be -12 minus 3. I'm sorry if this work seems sloppy. I'm trying to combine it. Hopefully you guys can make sense. So -5 plus -7 is -12. -12 plus -2 is -14. -14 plus 2 is -12. -12, so now I'm here. -12 plus -3 is going to be -15. So I have -15, and then you count the numbers that you have. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 numbers. So it's -15 divided by 5. -15 divided by 5 is going to be -3. So the average low temperature for the 5 days is -3 degrees Fahrenheit. Actually, it should say degrees Fahrenheit. So I'm going to go ahead and write that out as a sentence. So go ahead and write the average low temperature is -3 degrees Fahrenheit. Okay? So here are some rules for positive and negative numbers. If you are dividing or multiplying by 2 negatives, it turns to a positive. So for example, number 2, you have -8 times -8, that's positive 64. But if you just have 1 negative divided or multiplied by a positive, or vice versa, if the 8 were negative and the 64 were positive, you're just looking at how many negatives you have. You have 1. So your answer is still going to be negative. So when you're multiplying or dividing, a positive times or divided by a positive is always going to be positive. But if you have a negative times or divided by a negative, it's going to turn positive. But if you have a negative times a positive or a positive times a negative, those are both going to be negative. So I like to think of a scenario of like a positive person and a positive person. If a positive person has a conversation with a positive person, it's going to probably be a positive conversation, right? Now, if you have a negative person and a negative person having they're having a conversation, it's probably going to be a positive thing for them because the negative person is going to have somebody to relate to with the negative person, so it's going to turn into like something positive. Now, if you have a negative person and a positive person, you're most likely going to have a negative interaction. Or a positive person and a negative person is same thing. They're probably going to have a negative interaction. This only works for multiplication or division. It doesn't work for adding or subtracting, as you guys have already learned. So try not to get them confused. This is only when you're multiplying or you're dividing. So back to number 2, -64 divided by 8 is -8. And then the last one, I think this is the only example that's going to have a fraction. When you have a number right next to another number and there's a division right there, this is the distributive property. So you would do 2 times -6/7. And 2 is a whole number, so you can just put a 1 under it, because every whole number you can just put a 1 under. It's like saying 1 goes into 2 2 times. It's the same thing as writing 2 as 2 over 1. 2 is the same thing as writing 2 over 1. Just a little, I'm sorry. I'm supposed to put 2 over 1 right there. 2 is the same thing as writing 2 over 1. Just like a little side note. You guys can put a little thought bubble around it. My drawing is terrible, but it's just like a side note. So back to the example. 2 over 1 times -6/7. So that's, you just multiply the ones on top. So 2 times -6 and 1 times 7. A positive times a negative, it's still negative, which is -12. And then 1 times 7 is just 7. So this would be my answer. Another way to rewrite this is like this. -12/7. You can also rewrite it like this. 12 over -7. Those are all equivalent. What matters is that there's only one negative. So it doesn't matter if it's next to the fraction, if it's next to 12, or if it's next to 7. What matters is that there's just one negative in each of those. So those are all equivalent fractions. You can also do the mixed number. Right there we have the, what is it called? It's called an improper fraction, but we can also do the mixed number. So how you would do that is like this. You can put the negative in front of the 12 or the negative in front of the 7. What matters is that there's only one negative. 7 goes into 12 one time. If you subtract that, you have 5 left over, so you would have -1 5/7. So that is also equivalent to these. So there are 4 versions of this. Again, you're not going to probably have another fraction on this week's Quizzette, but definitely expect it for next week or on your work that you guys have this week, either classwork or homework. Moving on to number 3. Number 3, I love these questions, number 3 and 4, because I've seen these on SBAC time and time again. Not just on SBAC, but like on the CASP, it's called CASP or SBAC. I've also seen it in the practice exams and the practice work that they release. So these are definitely, expect to see examples like number 3 and 4 each day. That's why I gave you 2, so that you got some practice in. So it says, which of these are equal to 10? Simplify all that apply. So if you look here, this is +10. So you're trying to see which ones are equal to +10. The first one is 110 divided by -11. That's actually -10 because there's one negative. Here you have a negative divided by a negative, so you know it's going to be positive. But does 11 go into 110 10 times? Yeah. Yes, it does. So it would be +10. So this one is correct. This one out here, it only has one negative. So if you were to simplify this, it would be like -1, because this is a little invisible 1, over 1 times 110 over 11. That would be -110 over 11. And that, unfortunately, is going to be -10. And -10 is not what you want. You just want +10. So the second one is the only right answer. Number 4. Which of these are equal to +9? So we're looking to see which ones are equal to +9. That's the goal. The first one, 10 goes into 90 9 times. That is what we want, so that's correct. The next one, a -90 divided by -10 is +9. So this one is also correct. This one right here is like having -1 outside. Remember, -1 over 1 times 90 over 10. That's going to be -90 over 10. 10 goes into -90, -9 times. And that is not what we want. So the only answers, or the correct equivalent expressions, are the first one and the second one. If you have any questions, make sure you raise your hand. Please don't talk to your groups. And good luck on this week's Quizzette.